The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 5th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus spoke to the crowd, saying, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I think this almost goes without saying, but sure has been one heck of a winter, huh? I'm sure there's been worse, one where you have to measure the snow with a yardstick instead of a ruler. But still, this one's been a little annoying, because as I've mentioned probably every week, the weather always seems to come on the weekends. Like back in December, when all of the town's Christmas activities were being postponed and eventually canceled. One of those activities being the Sedalia Christmas Parade. Maybe you were thinking about that, where it was postponed from week to week to week until it was finally canceled. Yet even with it being canceled, did you know our float came in second place? We didn't even go to it, we won. I don't know how that works. But then we enter this new year, and we've been getting these Arctic temperatures and all this snow and ice, which is once again messing up our schedules. We've missed 2 weekends of worship so far because of the weather. Our students and teachers and school employees could probably tell us how many days they now have to make up. Our roads and sidewalks have all been quite treacherous. Now, many of you have told me, well, this is Missouri. If you don't like the weather, wait till tomorrow. Well, I did. I waited till tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and I can still barely see the road in front of the church. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had some dedicated volunteers out there pushing and shoveling and scraping and sweeping all that snow. But no matter how much you do or how hard you try to clear the snow and ice, the only way to get all of it, to get down to that bare pavement, is with a little bit of salt and light. You know, this is the time of year when we hear all kinds of those reports from around the country of traffic tie-ups and accidents due to the bad weather and frozen roads, and all the things that the highway departments are doing to try to prevent those things from happening, keep them safe. We hear reports of the numbers of tons of rock salt that's being used and spread by the highway crews to stay ahead of the ice. And in these types of winters, then we start hearing about how quickly that salt is going out and how slowly it's being replenished and how much it's costing all of us. We hear about cities and counties who are facing salt shortages and the types of things that they're trying to do to prevent running out of salt, which would just be a complete disaster for travelers. For instance, I heard on the news a couple days ago that the Missouri state crews are starting to add sand into their salt to stretch their supply a little bit further. I've heard of other places that use this liquid brine made from salt or cheese or beets or other things, using this liquid to spray on the streets to prevent the ice from happening, which seems to be working. But still, when the conditions are right, it seems like the best thing to use in this nasty weather to keep us safe on the streets and the sidewalks is just plain old salt. Well, that and the sun. I mean, more than anything else, the sun can take care of the snow and ice. Even when it's 20 degrees outside, the light from that sun can melt away the snow and the ice like it was a warm spring day. Especially around our building, it becomes obvious where the sun does and doesn't hit. And those places where it doesn't hit can be quite treacherous and needs some salt and shoveling. But that power from that light of the sun is such an amazing thing. But there's something today that tells me that Jesus wasn't really teaching his disciples and these crowds about roads and sidewalks that were covered with ice, or snow and ice that prevent or causes poor driving conditions, or the dilemma that comes from canceling worship or school due to the weather. Well, I doubt, too, that this was a cooking or science object lesson that he was teaching. I was thinking, maybe there were questions that came from the disciples or the crowds about what they were supposed to be doing. Maybe there were questions from them about who they were supposed to be. Maybe they were wondering, since all of them were Jewish, how, now that Jesus was with them, the law pertains to them, the Jewish law pertains to them. So it's out of these thoughts that we get Jesus' long teaching known as the Sermon on the Mount. And just so you know, we're going to hear this sermon for the next 3 weeks. So keep coming back. But imagine wondering, who am I? What is my role here in this place? But then imagine Jesus telling you, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. I mean, let's think more about what those things are. For the folks who were hearing Jesus' words in that day, they probably weren't thinking about something that comes in a packet through a fast food window or something that's spread on the ground in bad weather. They were thinking more about that essential substance that somehow preserves their food for them to survive day to day and through the winter. Something that was so important that they even used it in trade and commerce as money. When they hear about light, they'd be thinking about the light that comes from the sun, which is only available when it's available. And beyond that, if they need light, it takes a fair amount of work. But then I started thinking about, how do these things affect us today? I like to cook, but I don't know much more about cooking than what I read off a recipe. What I think I do know is that salt doesn't have very much of a flavor. Actually, hardly any flavor at all. Yet almost every single recipe that I follow, healthy or not, calls for salt. So rather than bringing its own flavor into the recipe, I understand it enhances the flavors of all the other ingredients that are already there. Is that right? I need some people who know it more than I do here. Does that sound right? We'll go with it. All right. So salt, in a way, just lies hidden in there, lifting up and making stronger what's already there. Too much of it, though, and we know what might happen. So then there's light. And we're kind of spoiled with this, right? With the flick of a match or a snap of a lighter, we have a flame anytime we need it. With a turn of a switch, we can turn on as much or as little light as we want, and we can dim it anywhere in between that we'd like. We don't have to rely on whether the sun is up or whether the clouds are out. We control the light. Well, except when we need the sun to warm us up or to melt the snow and ice or lift us out of a seasonal depression. But just like salt needs something to flavor, something to bring the flavors out, light needs something to illuminate. Staring into the light doesn't do much good. and actually can do harm, but letting the light illuminate what's already around us and letting us see what's actually there. The vividness of individual colors is worthless without light highlighting those colors. I mean, light highlights the brights and the darks and brings contrast and meaning to the things that are around us. And as it's the same with salt, too much light can also cause damage that we know a whole lot about as well. So we hear then, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Jesus is telling us that we bring flavor to the world. We can bring out the good things that are around us, but in the very same way, we can enhance the evil things that are around us just as easily. Just like salt that brings out the flavors of the ingredients, we aren't necessarily the source of good or evil in this world. We're not the source of those ingredients. We only serve to bring out what is good or what is evil. Which one would you rather do? Jesus is also telling us that we illuminate what's already present in this world. Are we going to illuminate the things that lead to and point to the kingdom of God? Or are we going to light up the things that bring others down? The salt of the gospel flavors the best qualities of being human, and the light of the gospel shines on what is noble and good. That's the good news that Jesus is proclaiming from the mountaintop. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. It's no wonder that part of Jesus' proclamation that day is something that we've taken and we use in our baptism services. Let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. We are called to enhance, to bring flavor and illumination to those things that God is already doing here. That's our calling at baptism. I mean, do you remember that? That's our calling today as well. Can you remember that? Why don't you turn to somebody and tell them, let your light shine before others. Go ahead. That's shining God's light. That's what we need to remember. That's what we're called to do. That's what we hear at our baptism. So we hear it today. God is at work around us, and God uses us to make even better what is already going on. So people of St. Paul's, people of God, let your light shine, and let your salt be flavorful. And maybe you can use some of that salt on the roads on the way home. Amen.